Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I stepped off the shuttle, the one that stitched the airport to the fabric of the Grand Coast Resort. I felt the ocean breeze hit my face. Warm, a belated invitation, a command, almost, to finally switch off from work. It was a familiar battle. Whenever I went on vacation with my wife, with Coralie, I carried an invisible mental folder. It was heavy, packed with unseen spreadsheets and phantom deadlines that whispered at the edges of my hearing. But on this late Friday afternoon, I promised myself a truce. 3 days, 72 hours without alarms, without the chime of a new email, without a single question about conversion rates. Coralie was already 10 steps ahead of me. She was spinning, a whirlwind of linen and laughter, filming the Grand Resort sign with her phone. The wind caught her hair, a cascade of dark silk, and made it take up the entire screen. She didn't care, she just laughed, a sound that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. She seemed like a different person when salt began to soak into her skin. Lighter, freer, and this, I thought, watching her, this was part of why I still fought for our 8-year marriage. I was still surprised by her, by the way Coralie reinvented herself by the sea. It was a version of her I desperately missed in the gray quiet of our city apartment. Arriving at the lobby confirmed another old realization. Coralie allowed herself to be dazzled, without shame, without cynicism. While I stood at the polished counter, signing the check-in forms and handing over my credit card, she moved between the marble columns. Her voice, full of genuine wonder, echoed slightly in the cavernous space. She commented loudly on the shell-shaped chandelier, a monstrosity of glass and gold that she found utterly enchanting. She tasted the corner of a chilled towel offered by the receptionist, her eyes closing in approval. She even loved the ambient music, a generic orchestral score that sounded like the soundtrack to a movie about a place exactly like this. Just as I was pocketing the receipt, a voice cut through the air. "Vance, is that you? You old dog?" The hotel manager, Donovan Reed, an old college buddy, appeared in a navy blue blazer with a smile that was ready for a marketing brochure. We hugged, the kind with hard backslaps that men use to say things they can't find words for. We exchanged a few quick jokes about poker nights that never ended and waistlines that never shrank. Finally, Donovan slid the magnetic keys across the counter. "Room 712. With a view of the cove. You're just in time," he said, his smile widening. In the same breath, he extended an invitation to the traditional volleyball game, guests versus staff. Saturday at 9 a.m., I laughed. "Don, I'm not the same athlete I was 20 years ago." "Nobody is," he countered, "but the sand is soft, and pride is a great painkiller." I promised I'd be there, provided the rules allowed for plenty of stretching. On the way to the elevator, Coralie, who had been listening with half an ear, grabbed an activity flyer stacked on a counter. She was drawn to color, to possibility. The photo dominating the cover showed a diver suspended in a world of impossible blue, surrounded by a confetti of colorful fish over a shallow reef. The silver tank on his back reflected the turquoise light. "Look at this, Eli," she said, shoving the paper against my chest. Her finger tapped on the bold text. "Scuba diving offshore. There's an intro session, early tomorrow." I raised my eyebrows. I'd never been comfortable with the idea. I never learned how to properly equalize the pressure in my ears, and the thought of descending meters into the crushing silence, tied to a tank of air, it made something in my chest tighten. Still, I saw the light in her eyes. That familiar, hungry spark, so I managed a non-committal, "We'll see." Next to the text, the instructor's name appeared in large, stylized letters. Kaelin Croft. The name felt curated, like it was designed to be on a flyer just like this one. I didn't think anything more of it. Not then. 3 minutes later, as we were riding the mirrored elevator, the silence was broken. A male voice, smooth as polished stone, announced from inside the cabin with us, "First lucky couple I run into today." It was him, Kaelin Croft. He was holding a box of bright blue flippers, the label still brand new. He was exactly as the flyer hinted. Tall, tanned in a way that spoke of a life lived under a friendly Sunday. He had a smile that showed all his teeth, and he spoke with drawn-out vowels, the kind typical of reality show hosts who guide you through dramatic choices. Before I could even react, Kaelin took the initiative, his thumb pressing the button for the 7th floor, and without missing a beat, he launched into his private show. It wasn't a conversation, it was a performance. He asked where we were from. Before Coralie could fully answer, He complimented her soft accent, saying it was like music. He mentioned, with practiced casualness, that he'd guided couples from Norway to Brazil, as if collecting nationalities was his hobby. He gestured vaguely towards the window. If God were truly whimsical, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush, he would have painted all the reefs on the planet with the colors we have right here, right near the sandbar that marks the resort's territory. Emberly, Coralie let out a laugh. It wasn't her polite chuckle, or her amused giggle. It was a full, uninhibited laugh that I hadn't heard in months. A sound that used to be reserved for me, for our inside jokes, in the quiet of our kitchen. Hearing it directed at this stranger, it felt like a theft. When the metallic voice announced our destination and the doors slid open, Kalen offered to carry our bags. He claimed his morning prayer included working on his triceps specifically for that purpose. It was a ridiculous line, but he delivered it with such charming audacity that Coralie laughed again. "We're fine, thanks," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. I gripped the handle of my rolling suitcase, a silent declaration. A second before we parted ways in the hallway, the instructor winked. He didn't wink at me. He winked at Coralie. "Intro session tomorrow at 8. He reminded her, his voice low. "If you arrive 5 minutes early, I'll have more time to show you the equipment personally." Once the door to room 712 closed behind us, the hallway suddenly felt narrower, as if the rolling suitcase didn't fit alongside the loaded, heavy feeling in my chest. The room was beautiful. It had a balcony with glass railings, a king-size bed that looked like a cloud, and an artificial coconut scent mixed with some kind of citrus disinfectant. Coralie dropped her backpack and ran straight to the balcony, her phone already out to film the sunset. I, out of habit, did a practical sweep. I checked the air conditioning temperature, the Wi-Fi password, the position of the in-room safe. When she returned from the balcony, her face was flushed with excitement. She described in detail the ballet of fishing boats drifting away in the distance, each sail turned to gold by the late afternoon light. I listened, or I tried to, but half of my attention was snagged on a recent memory, on the sound of Coralie's laugh at Kalen's compliments. "It shouldn't bother you," I repeated to myself. "It's just tour guide charisma. It's his job." Even so, during dinner that first night, a seafood sequence that included grilled lobster and chilled white wine, I noticed her scanning the dining hall. Her eyes weren't looking for a waiter. They were searching. Perhaps, I thought, for the instructor. I steered the conversation toward the taste of different wines, the architecture of the resort, our plans for the day after tomorrow. But the silent tension had already settled between us, invisible and cold as the condensation on my glass. Saturday dawned with the smell of roasted coffee and relentless sun, filtered into pale stripes through the translucent curtains. I was already in my athletic shorts when my phone buzzed. It was Dawn, confirming the volleyball match. It was 8 a.m. The first serve would be in an hour. Coralie emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her hair turbaned in another. "Will you come with me to the diving session?" she asked, her voice hopeful. I gestured to my clothes. "I've got the game, remember? Dawn's counting on me, but if you want, you could watch from the sandstands afterward." She shook her head, a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "It's okay," she said, a little too quickly. "I'll check out the souvenir shops, and maybe stop by the diving area to ask about extra excursions." I walked over and kissed her forehead. It felt formal, an act performed out of habit. I tried to ignore the pang of jealousy growing along with the sun outside, a small, ugly thing coiling in my gut. We left the room together. We walked in silence until the sidewalk forked. She went right, toward the shops and the sea. I went left, toward the palm trees and the volleyball court. The sound of artificial birds chirping from the ambient sound system announced a perfect day, but I felt the opposite premonition. A storm was gathering, and I was the only one who could feel the change in pressure. The volleyball court was exactly as Dawn had described it, tucked between tall palm trees and rows of lounge chairs, already occupied by guests armed with colorful, sweating drinks. Dawn handed me a green t-shirt with the resort's logo and quickly outlined the strategy. "Short serves," he said, and forced the center block. The waiter playing defense for the staff team was unbeatable at the back of the court. The sun hammered down for 2 full hours. It was brutal, exhilarating. I dove into the sand to save impossible balls, my muscles screaming in protest. It felt good to feel a physical pain, something simple and clean I could understand. At one point, I heard Coralie shout my name. Just once, she had really come to watch, and a juvenile pride, something I hadn't felt since my college championships, reignited in my chest. I played harder, driven by that single shout. In the end, the guests won, 21-18. A sweaty, hard-fought victory. When I went to grab my towel, my chest heaving, I looked around for her. The chair she had been in was empty. Before I could ask, Don clapped me on the shoulder. "Great game, man. I saw your wife heading toward the central pools after the first set. She probably went to get more water or find some shade." I smiled. It felt unconvincing, even to me. Still out of breath, my skin caked in a mixture of sweat and sand, I climbed the external stairs of our block. I crossed the stuffy, quiet hallways and pushed open the door to our room. Coralie's towel lay in a damp heap on the bed. Her phone was charging next to the nightstand. There was no other clue to where she was. The clock on my phone read 11:15 a.m. I took a quick shower, the water washing away the grime but not the unease. I put on dry shorts and decided to look for her. I walked through the manicured gardens, past the clatter and sizzle of the outdoor buffet line. I asked a waiter if he'd seen a woman in a straw hat and an orange beach cover-up. The young man pointed. "I believe I saw her over there, sir." Toward the diving hut. I followed his gesture. As I approached, a familiar scene came into focus. I recognized Kalen from afar. He was talking animatedly, using broad hand gestures as if describing leaping whales or epic underwater journeys. And there, sitting on a weathered wooden bench, was Coralie. She was laughing. It was that same laugh from the elevator, full, unrestrained. But this time, it didn't just feel like a theft. The sound echoed like a hammer blow against my consciousness. I stopped. I hid myself behind a thick, whitewashed column, feeling like a spy in my own life. I observed them. Their gestures were friendly, I told myself. There was no physical contact, but there was an intimacy, an easy, shared energy that felt dangerous. It was too much intimacy for two people who had just met. It was too much intimacy for a woman in an 8-year marriage that had lately been defined by silences. Gathering my courage, I stepped out from behind the column. I walked up to them, clapping my hands together to shake off imaginary sand, an awkward, loud gesture to announce my presence. Coralie looked up, her expression a mixture of surprise and, perhaps, a little guilt. Blake, ever the performer, didn't miss a beat. He made a point of complimenting my performance on the court, said he'd seen part of the game from the bar terrace, and that I had a champion's arm. It was all so smooth, so practiced. Then Jennifer jumped in, her voice bright with an excitement that felt sharp and painful to me. She talked about an extra excursion Kalen had just told her about. It was scheduled for 5 in the morning, the very next day. A private trip, heading to a remote reef where coral formed natural, underwater tunnels. "The instructor assures me the premium package covers everything," she said, looking at me. But her words felt aimed at convincing herself. "And since it's such an early hour, the boat will be almost empty. Just us." "Just us?" I looked from her eager face to Kalen's confident smile. I said I'd think about it. Kalen said goodbye with an exaggerated politeness, promising to reserve 2 spots just in case we changed our minds. He was already certain of the outcome. When we were alone, walking back to the room, the silence was thick with unspoken words. "What were you doing there for so long?" I finally asked, my voice tight. "I was just walking around the pools," she explained, avoiding my eyes. "I bumped into Kalen by chance, and he offered to show me the new diving instruments they got in. It was interesting." He swallowed hard. The lie, or the half-truth, was so casual. "I don't appreciate his tone," I said, "the way he talks to you." She laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Oh, Eli, don't be silly. It's just how he is. It's harmless, harmless." The word hung in the air between us as we returned to the room, an invisible cloud following each step. Before dinner, I tried again. I tried to be calm, rational. "Coralie," I began, sitting on the edge of the bed, "I don't feel comfortable with that pre-dawn dive. I'd prefer we schedule something in a group, at a civilized hour." She raised her chin, her defensiveness flaring instantly. "I love diving, Elias. You know that. For 2 years, I've been trying to get you interested in it, and you never have been." "This isn't about that," I replied, my own voice rising. "I'm not forbidding anything, but I think it's reckless to go with a stranger to a remote beach at 5 in the morning." "Oh, The word forbid triggered a warning signal in her. It was the wrong word, and I knew it the moment it left my mouth. The conversation devolved from there. We argued quietly, intensely, about trust and freedom and boundaries. Our whispers were sharp, like knives. The argument only stopped when someone knocked on the neighboring wall, a muffled thud asking for silence. We stifled the topic. We went down to the buffet restaurant, and the atmosphere at our table could have been cut with a swordfish knife from the main course. Coralie barely touched her wine. I ate without tasting anything. We went up to bed early, turned off the lights without goodnight kisses, each of us sunk in our own unfathomable, angry thoughts. When my phone's alarm went off at 7 a.m., the left side of the bed was cold and empty. I called her name once. Coralie? Nothing. I got up, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I opened the bathroom door. Dry towels. The balcony door was slightly ajar, the morning air already warm. The balcony was empty. I went to the nightstand and saw it. A note, written on a piece of recycled hotel paper. Went on the diving trip, back before lunch. Love you. The hurried handwriting trembled at the corner of the page. The world spun for a moment, as if I were still lying down. In 10 minutes, I had pulled on jeans, slipped on sneakers, and was heading down to the reception desk. I found Don in his office just off the lobby. I tried to keep my voice steady. Don, my wife, Coralie, she went on that early morning dive trip with Kaylin Croft. Do you know when they're expected back? Don checked his tablet. Ah, yes, the 5 a.m. charter to Coral Tunnel Reef. They should be back around noon. Just the one couple registered, but it looks like the husband backed out last minute. Said he had a stiff neck. He looked up at me, smiling, oblivious. The phrase echoed in my head, a war drum picking up its rhythm. Just your wife and the instructor. The hours that followed were a special kind of hell. Each minute fell on me like an invisible weight. I tried to occupy my mind. I sat by the pool, reading news on my phone, but the letters blurred together into meaningless shapes. At 11:45 a.m., I positioned myself on the sand near the main pier. I watched the horizon, a sharp blue line marked by small white crests. Noon came and went. Regular tourist boats, crowded and loud, docked and departed. The small, blue diving boat didn't. At 12:30, Don sent me a text. Might have stopped to fix something minor. Engine hiccups are common. Don't worry. 1 o'clock passed. Then 1:30. At exactly 2 p.m., a speck of blue appeared on the horizon. As it grew larger, I could make it out. The diving boat. I recognized Coralie sitting on the bow, her ponytail swaying in the wind. Kaylin was beside her, piloting the boat with a relaxed, easy demeanor. There were no other passengers. The engine shut off as they glided to the dock. They jumped onto the wooden planks, laughing about something. I kept a stoic posture, but a volcanic anger was boiling under my skin. Without saying a word, I walked forward. I took Coralie's wet backpack from her shoulder. I intertwined my fingers with hers, a gesture of ownership, not affection, and led her toward the hotel. The silence on the elevator ride up was heavier than any diving tank. It was crushing. As soon as we entered room 712, I closed the door with surgical care. And then, I exploded. 9 hours, I said, my voice dangerously low. The trip was supposed to take half that. Where were you? Eli. The boat had a problem. A problem? I interrupted. Do you realize how improper it is to spend an entire day on a deserted beach with a man you barely know? He's not barely known. He's a trained employee, she retorted, her voice rising to match mine. The fuel pump had a problem. We had to wait for the tide to rise to start the backup motor. Proof, I demanded. Show me proof. A call. A text. I didn't have my phone. I left it here. You know that. The argument escalated. It wasn't about a broken fuel pump anymore. It was about years of small resentments, of feeling unheard, of a widening gap between us. It was about freedom and control, about trust and betrayal. It continued until Coralie cried for the first time. Great, heaving sobs, but this time, her tears weren't enough to dissipate my fury. They felt insufficient. I turned from her, walked to my suitcase, and started throwing my clothes back in, as if discarding the evidence of a crime. What are you doing? She sobbed. We're leaving, I announced, my voice cold and final. On the first available flight. She tried to hug me, to hold me. I pulled away. The touch of her skin felt like a brand. I left the room, went down 2 flights of stairs, and went straight to Don's office. I closed the door behind me. I told him the story, my tone firm, businesslike. Suspicion of inappropriate conduct between an instructor and a guest. A breach of trust. Possible harassment. Don, who until that moment had been just a beer buddy from the past, immediately adopted a professional demeanor. His face became a mask of serious concern. "Elias," he said quietly, "all of our resort boats have security cameras installed. For liability, I can review the footage." I agreed, feeling my stomach freeze. It was a strange mix of terror and relief. Part of me was terrified of what I would see. The other part knew that confirmation, however painful, would mean the end of this agonizing uncertainty. It would mean the end of something I once believed was indestructible. The monitoring room was in a refrigerated basement, a world away from the sun-drenched paradise upstairs. The air hummed with the low thrum of servers. Dozens of screens displayed silent, watchful angles of the resort. The pool, the reception desk, the dock. Don's fingers flew across a keyboard, fast-forwarding through hours of footage. He isolated the feed from the small blue boat, time-stamped at 5:10 inches the morning. The first sequence showed Coralie adjusting her life jacket while Kalen tested a regulator. It looked innocent, professional. Then, there were scenes of the open sea, just blue water and white spray. Then, the camera's view stabilized. They had reached the deserted beach. The boat's camera, mounted on the small cabin, captured a wide, static shot of the sand. There, Kylan spread a large towel on the ground. He pointed at something in the sky, and Coralie looked up. Seconds later, he moved closer to her. It wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't a gesture that could be misinterpreted. There was no room for benevolent interpretation. It was possible to see, without any doubt, a prolonged kiss. Later, the camera showed them at a distance. Kalen filmed Coralie as she took a brief, solo dive near the shore. Then he lay down on the towel beside her. The lens was too far, the resolution not sharp enough for vivid details, but their intimate posture, the way their bodies were angled towards each other, left no room for doubt. They were not two people stranded by a broken engine. They were two people stealing time. I felt my face burn, a hot flush of shame and rage. Don paused the video. The image of them on the beach froze on the screen. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. The only sound was the hum of the machine. Finally, the manager, my friend, asked quietly, "Do you want a copy?" I confirmed with just a single, sharp nod. It felt like signing a sentence. Kalen Croft was summoned to the office immediately. He walked in with a hint of his usual swagger, but it vanished when he saw me standing there, next to Don, in the cold, windowless room. He tried to justify himself. He said the boat had malfunctioned, that the scare had brought them closer, that it was a moment of weakness. Don cut him off, his voice devoid of any warmth. He reminded Kalen of the clause in the internal employee manual, the one strictly prohibiting relationships with guests. He informed him of his termination for just cause, effective immediately. Kalen didn't argue. He just took a deep breath, offered a generic, hollow apology in my direction, and left the office with his staff ID badge in his hand. I stored the copy of the video on a small, black USB drive provided by hotel security. It felt impossibly heavy in my palm. I climbed the stairs back to the 7th floor with leaden steps. Each step was a conscious effort. When I opened the door, Coralie was sitting on the floor, her back against the wall, her face swollen and red from crying. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. I didn't speak. I handed her the USB drive. I turned on the large flat-screen television, plugged the drive into the port on the side, and navigated to the video file. I hit play. The silent, damning footage filled the screen. She covered her mouth with her hands. A sob tore from her throat, a raw, wounded sound. When the scene of the kiss played out, she broke down completely. It was a mistake, she swore through her tears. "Elias, I swear, I felt so seduced, so vulnerable. It was the first and only time. It meant nothing." I listened to everything without interrupting. I watched the woman on the screen, and the woman on the floor, and I felt nothing but a vast, cold emptiness. Inside me, something had cracked. Irreversibly. It was like tempered glass that holds its shape until one final shock, and then shatters entirely, into a million tiny, useless pieces. We packed the rest of our things in a dead, suffocating silence. The only sounds were the zip of suitcases and the rustle of clothes being folded, or rather, shoved back into place. I went down to the lobby alone. I paid the bill. I declined Dawn's quiet offer for a farewell drink, a gesture of friendship I couldn't accept at that moment. I booked a taxi to the airport. On the way, in the back of the air-conditioned van, Coralie repeated her promises. Promises to change, to fix things, to earn back my trust. I replied only once, my eyes fixed on the blurring palm trees outside the window. There is nothing to discuss until we are home. The overnight flight became a stage for broken memories. My mind, against my will, played a highlight reel of our life together. Our first trip to a small cabin in the mountains. The marriage proposal at sunset, on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. The painstaking process of furnishing our first apartment, piece by piece, on installment plans. I alternated between a searing, white-hot anger and a deep, crushing grief. At some point, Coralie fell asleep, her head resting against the cool plastic of the window. Her face, even in sleep, was etched with sorrow. I watched her reflection in the dark glass, trying to understand, trying to pinpoint the moment, the hairline fracture where circumstantial weakness began and a failure of character ended. When we landed, the distance between us was greater than the 1,000 miles we had traveled overnight. At home, the apartment felt smaller, claustrophobic, as if the walls had moved closer to listen to our silence. I placed my suitcase in the hallway. "I want you to have your things removed by the end of the week," I said. The words came out flat, devoid of emotion. I was an automaton delivering a pre-programmed message. She begged. She pleaded for couples therapy. She mentioned friends of ours who had overcome similar crises, who had found a way back to each other. I walked to the living room table, the one where we kept a collection of framed travel photos. Us in Paris. Us in Rome. Us at the Grand Canyon. One by one, I turned all of them to face the wall. "I can't rebuild on a foundation of recent lies," I said, my back to her. She tried to touch my hand. I pulled away. The collective silence of the old furniture, the familiar scent of our home, turned her cry for help into a hollow echo. I went up to my home office, locked the door, and for the first time in years, I cried. Not quiet, dignified tears, but ugly, wrenching sobs, without caring about seeming strong. 3 days later, Coralie left. She had 2 rolling suitcases, a coat draped over her arm, and the look of someone trying to memorize every detail of a place before the door closes for the last time. Rachel, her childhood friend, was waiting for her in a car parked downstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to read a financial report I couldn't comprehend. The sound of the elevator descending through the building was a physical, final proof that something had ended. That same night, I opened my laptop. I drafted an email to a family law attorney. I attached the video file and detailed the facts in an objective, dispassionate tone. It felt like writing a business report about the failure of a major project. The response came within hours. The lawyer's assessment was clinical and swift. Conclusive proof of a breach of marital duty. The possibility of requesting an unequal division of assets. A strong case for dismissing any alimony claims. I read the email twice, feeling a bitter, hollow kind of relief. I didn't intend to humiliate her, not truly. But I refused to carry the financial and emotional weight of her mistake alone. The following months passed like the slow, grinding gears of an old clock. The initial petition. The preliminary hearing. Deadlines for rebuttals. Coralie's defense team claimed emotional fragility, combined with undue influence by the instructor. But the video spoke louder than any legal argument. In his ruling, the judge explicitly mentioned the breach of marital duty and classified the case under exclusive fault. That ruling eliminated any possibility of compensatory alimony. The division of assets followed the partial community property regime, but given the evidence, a principle of inequitable conduct was applied. It granted me full ownership of the apartment, which I had purchased before our marriage, and a significantly larger share of our joint financial investments. My lawyer also successfully requested sanctions for bad faith litigation when the opposing party tried to challenge the video's authenticity, an argument immediately dismissed by the clear chain of custody provided by the resort. Coralie remained silent in almost all the hearings, except to say, once, that she regretted everything. During this period, I experienced a kind of loneliness that was almost instructional. In the hallways at work, colleagues who knew the story discreetly commented, many of them applauding my firmness. They saw it as strength. They didn't see me at home, where Coralie's absence materialized in empty drawers and the cold side of the bed. I discovered that anger is a quick burning fuel. It gets you through the initial shock, the legal battles, the difficult conversations. But sooner or later, it burns out. And when it does, only the cold ashes of grief remain. I started running in the park at dawn. I revamped my diet. I returned to writing short stories, a habit I'd abandoned years ago when work became all-consuming. Each running step seemed to expel a fragment of pain. Each word I wrote seemed to place a small, neat stone over a chaotic memory. Even so, sometimes, turning the corner that led back to my apartment building, the memory of that kiss on that deserted beach would rise up and humiliate me all over again. I realized I would have to learn to live with it, not erase it. Coralie, for her part, temporarily moved into Rachel's guest room. She sought a therapist. She immersed herself in online marketing courses to fill the long, empty nights. She avoided parties and mutual friends. She sent me sporadic messages, long, rambling confessions of regret that I read without replying. In one, she mentioned that Kalen had sent her an apology via social media, and that she had ignored and blocked him. I didn't know if this information was meant to console me, or just confess to me. It did neither. It just irritated me. I deleted the message and continued my day. The divorce proceedings advanced, but both our lives seemed to oscillate between the past and the present, like a rudderless boat that insists on staying close to a familiar, but now dangerous, shore. The final ruling came on a rainy October morning. The judge approved the agreement. The apartment and larger investments were mine. The car and smaller savings accounts were hers. No alimony. The courthouse set the date for the final signing in 30 days. During that interval, Coralie requested one final meeting. I agreed, in the name of civility, in the name of the 8 years that were not all bad. We sat in a quiet downtown cafe. She handed me a letter, saying she understood the consequences of her actions but that she would always cherish the good memories. I replied that I remembered the happy days too, but that I needed to move forward. There were no arguments. There were no tears. When we said goodbye, the only sound that remained was the metallic, brief, almost cutting click of her coffee cup being placed on its saucer. On the morning we signed the divorce papers, I arrived early at the courthouse. I crossed the marble lobby and took a deep breath upon seeing my name on the electronic docket. Vance V. Vance. Coralie appeared minutes later. She was wearing a blue dress I recognized from a trip we took 2 years ago. We exchanged formal handshakes in front of the clerk. We completed the procedure, signing our names on lines that officially dissolved our union. We exited through opposite doors. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the still wet sidewalk. I stored the certified copy of the decree in my leather briefcase. I walked to my car feeling a strange, hollow mix of relief and emptiness. I retrieved my phone from my pocket. I opened the photo gallery, scrolled to the last picture I had of her, and deleted it. Life goes on, I thought, but it would take time. A long time, until the sound of that boat motor, the image of that kiss filmed from afar, and the bitter taste of betrayal became just an old file on a forgotten USB drive. Driving back home, I remembered something my old college volleyball coach used to repeat after a tough practice. Discipline, he'd say, is doing what needs to be done, even when no one is watching. I used to smile when I heard that phrase, thinking it was just about sports. But now, its meaning was different, vastly different. The discipline of the heart, I concluded, would be learning not to surrender, not to bitterness, not to cynicism. It would be the quiet, unseen work of rebuilding, one day at a time, even when no one was watching. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.